All right. Well, we are live after game four of the NBA playoffs between the Portland Trailblazers and the Denver Nuggets. A very surprising yet pleasing result for us Portland fans. The Blazers clearly want that game more. They go in and just dominate Denver 115 to 95. What stood out to you today, John?
Yeah. I mean, pretty close to the first half. Denver's able to keep with Portland. I know they made that run. I think it was early in the second quarter when Jokic went out. But other than that, Portland, I mean, they just blew them out of the water. The starters for Denver just to start the game were really flat. To start the third quarter were really flat. They never were able to get it going. Their bench unit was good in the first end, but other than that, Portland just, I mean, they cooked them on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, and obviously the stories of the game today were Norman Powell and Yusuf Nurkic, especially Powell. 29 points, 11 of 14 shooting, I believe it was. I'll have to check the box here to make sure I've got that right. But
Yeah,
what a
I'm
game
checking
from
right
Norman
now.
Powell. That's the playoff Powell Toronto fans were promising us Portland fans. That was an amazing performance from Norm. And you see what Portland can do when he's clicking like that.
Yeah, and Norm is he's such an impressive player too because it doesn't ever feel like he's like pressing or pushing to get his points. All his points come super naturally. He's super good at getting to the rim, and his bounce helps so much. Larger dudes can't contest his shots because he's jumping up so high and releasing so high, and then
Yeah.
his layups he's basically just setting the ball in the rim. Um, so he had a really great play. That's just his offense. He's just as good defensively with his long arms and his ability to get in the passing lane. Something I noticed today, very encouraging for Portland, is that Nurkic's ability to get to the passing lanes was at full
Yeah.
capacity. I mean, he tipped like three or four passes from Jokic. Jokic had to go to the ground a couple of times to save possession. I think Nurkic has really been the key. His
Yeah.
defense, his improvement defensively really appears to be a key.
He has been so good. Outside of game two, he struggled a bit, but this homestand, the two games
Yeah.
in Portland, he has been so good. And today, like, I can't remember the last time we saw that many shots blocked by a Portland squad. The defensive intensity from Portland was the best we've seen it in a long, long time.
Oh,
But
absolutely. They were gobbling. I mean, you just look Aaron Gordon, minus 30, Jokic minus 32, Rivers minus 28, Compazzo minus 20, Porter Jr., who had probably the worst game of all of them, only minus 17, which is kind of funny.
yeah,
But yeah, no, they really just, I mean, they had control the whole game. Did Denver lead in this game? Did they end up taking the lead in the second quarter?
I don't think so. Let me see
Um,
here.
yeah, just going over, wow, plus 32 for
They
Nurk,
tied it in the
plus
second
they
quarter.
tied it. Okay, they didn't take the lead
Um,
then.
but I don't think they took the lead at any point. And that was really the only time where it was ever really like, come on, guys, was the beginning of the second quarter when Portland had built a lead with their starters,
Yeah.
and you're feeling good about it because they've played the best. They played the best defense, and they still did for the whole game. The best defense they've played on Jokic all series. Obviously, Jokic was pretty cold this game, and that probably won't be the case games five through potentially seven. But he was still
Yeah.
Nurkic's defense and the team defense on Jokic was just phenomenal. And Nurkic was efficient finishing around the rim. Still, a couple of them I wanted him to dunk it, but can't really complain too much when he's playing that efficiently. And you just have to be so encouraged with the fact also that Portland, Denver comes back and ties it with their bench unit. And you're kind of like, as a Portland fan, like, come on, guys, all that work, like
Yeah.
clamping down their role players, forcing Jokic into tough shots, and the bench comes in and it's all for naught. But then they build it back up to 10 at the end of halftime, and then in the third quarter, Portland just absolutely puts the game away. That was really encouraging to see because it's been kind of the bane of Portland throughout a lot of the Damon CJ era is bad third quarters, bad adjustments out of halftime, and this was not the case. They just ended it.
Yeah, they cooked them in the third quarter. Looking at the box score, what was it? 36 to 19, but I think Denver kind of climbed back at the end of the quarter. I think it started like
Yes.
36 to like what 36-14. But yeah, Portland really they dominated that third, and they sensed blood. I mean, they had a 10-point, 9-point lead at halftime. And so that's kind of at a spot where momentum is going to swing a pendulum. If Denver is able to get back in the game, it becomes a whole new game. They might be able to really make a run. But Portland sensed the opportunity, and they knew that this is a game that they must win. And so they went out there and they way outplayed them. Norm did a really good job of starting both halves really well. He I know first play of both halves, he got right to the rim and laid it in. So yeah, big win for Portland, because it's hard to imagine they're going to win the series if you're going to Denver down 3-1.
Yeah, no, it was a must win for Portland. And one thing we were talking about in our chat was it's been kind of a strange series so far, in that like normally you would expect every team to have a lot of intensity every game. And maybe the team that's like clearly down in the series has more urgency. But in this series, I think through the first 4 games, it's been so obvious every game which team wants it more. In game 1, Portland just came out and like we're like, hey, we're the more talented, skilled team, like the TNT broadcasters were talking about all game. We're just going to impose our will. We're going to do our thing, and Denver can't beat us if we're just doing that. Game 2, Denver clearly wanted it more. They knew that if they go down 2-0 at halftime, or at 2-0 after 2 games.
Nice.
If they go down 2-0 after dropping 2 games at home, the series is probably over. So Denver clearly wants the game more. Game 3, it's a little tighter, but Denver just had such a better game plan. It just was that was a case of like, yeah, I guess Denver wants this one more too. Portland's just a little more lackadaisical with their execution. And then this game, Denver looked lethargic and kind of lacking some energy. And that was the most energy we've seen from Portland in a long time, which was awesome to see. But this game, it was just so obvious that Portland wanted it more. And now we know there's going to be at least a game 6 in Portland, I think on Thursday.
Yes, Thursday. Time TBD. Yeah, game 5 is going to be Tuesday at 6 p.m. Back in Denver. Yeah, it was surprising that Denver, I know, I forget which announcer, if it was Haywood or if it was one of the halftime announcers, was talking about how this is a must win for Denver to be able to put that stranglehold. Yeah, to be able to put that stranglehold. And I completely agree. I think you have an opportunity if you're able to take this win to end the series at home, which is huge. But Denver they were never really, it was weird. Yeah, Portland obviously really wanted it, trying to save their season, but Denver really did not match the energy. And the team that's lost, to your point, the team that's lost every game in the series, outside of maybe game 3, has had way less energy than the other team, which is kind of odd. I'm not sure if like still the COVID effects is like playing into that or whatnot, but we haven't had any like super close competitive games like we did last time these two teams played, which is kind of interesting, at least down the stretch. Those all 4 games have stayed relatively close for most of the game. Well, at least for half a game.
Right.
But yeah, we haven't had any close finishes so far.
Yeah, that's a good point. Game 3 is the closest we've been, but it was never really it never really felt like Portland could truly get over the hump in game 3.
Yeah, it still felt out of reach the whole time.
You would probably expect that in game 5, just because, if Portland gets game 5, they've got an elimination game at home. And then if Denver gets it, obviously Denver, it's the same situation 2 years ago where Denver had 2 chances at finishing off Portland and they couldn't do it. So they're going to have that added motivation. Another big factor now, 2 days of rest. Dame and Jokic both did not play in the fourth quarter because of today's blowout nature. And we'll see if Will Barton comes back. That could be a big addition for the Nuggets.
Yeah, they need him badly. Their offense without Jokic out there is not very good. They don't really have much of a rhythm. They don't have someone to center them, especially because Composite is on the first unit now. They don't even, they have Monte Morris, but he's not a primary scorer. So teams aren't going to respect him nearly as much. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. We're at the same situation we were a couple years ago with Portland, Denver, flip-flopping both home games won. But It's going to be interesting to see what happens from here. Who do you have and in how many games?
I still think it's going 7,
Yeah,
which is what I predicted before the series. I was like, this seems pretty evenly matched. I thought Portland had more talent. Denver's better coached, plays a little better together as a team, and that's proven true. Um, the
100%.
game, the games Portland has won, game 1, Portland's talent was just superior. Um, Games 2 and 3, Denver played better as a team, outcoached Portland, and today, for whatever reason, Portland played one of the best, if not the best, games of the Lillard and CJ McCollum era. And Denver was just poor. They didn't play well at all. Um, but um, I think it goes 7. I think if Portland wins Game 5, I would probably take Portland in 6. I feel like Portland at home, smelling blood.
I agree.
So I guess if I'm predicting that it goes 7, I guess I'm taking Denver in Game 5. But I don't know. It really depends on a lot of what the series is boiling down to is literally the essence of basketball, which is just which team is making shots. Like game 3 and 4, that's what happened. I mean, Portland's defensive intensity in game 4 was just phenomenal, and you hope that can match. Nurkic staying out of foul trouble was a huge, huge deal. He didn't pick up a foul until I want to say
mid third quarter, right?
Late in the first quarter, I think, is when Nurkic picked up his first foul. But he finished with 3. So he was never close to being in foul trouble. And obviously the officials are usually not going to get Jokic in foul trouble unless it's egregious.
No, they prefer to have the best players in the game.
Yeah, so that was really huge. And we've complained about stats a lot, but credit where credit's due. He actually adjusted and matched Jokic's minutes with Nurkic. Nurkic played every minute that Jokic was off the floor, and he got his rest when Jokic got his rest. Which I think is a great move. It's what you have to do, especially if Nurkic isn't in foul trouble and is playing the way he is. He made life really hard for Jokic. Every shot that Jokic made, every shot that Jokic made was the few times the Blazers broke down defensively. Every contested shot Jokic missed, which that's not going to happen every game. Jokic is good enough. We saw in the first 3 games, Jokic is going to make some tough shots, but Nurkic just made life so tough for him. And the Blazers were so active in the passing lanes. It was so awesome to see on defense. Also a little irritating because you're like, man, it seems like they could do this every game.
But, where has this been?
But the sense of urgency was awesome to see. You hope to see it in Game 5, just knowing how important Game 5 is. 2 years ago, obviously, it was a blowout. Denver destroyed Portland, and then Portland just
they won by 30, I believe. Yeah,
just destroyed them. So it'll be interesting. From your perspective, what adjustments do you expect Denver to make in Game 5, if any? Maybe they just say, you know what, today we just didn't hit shots and Portland was hitting everything.
Yeah, I expect them to come out with more intensity. I would imagine that they're going to come out with the thought that if they lose Game 5 at home, that the series is over, that they're going to lose the series. So I would imagine they come out hungrier. It's going to be interesting. Almost every game could be determined by who looks hungrier in the first 2 minutes of the game, which is really weird. So I don't know who I have, to be honest. Denver, looking at their adjustments, I mean, Jokic has to be a more of a scorer. He has to have a better game just overall for them to have a chance.
Yeah.
And Porter Jr. too. They're gonna need to find adjustments with him because he took like 4 or 5 shots today.
He was a complete non-factor.
Yeah, it's like he wasn't even on the court at all. Michael Porter was one of 3 for 3 points and 5 rebounds.
And you credit Norman Powell for just as good as Powell was on offense. His defense on Porter Jr. was phenomenal. We talked about before the series about what's the Blazers matchup going to be. Are they going to put Covington on Porter Jr.? Are they going to put Powell on him? In this game, it was Powell, and they put Covington on Aaron Gordon, and it worked really, really well.
And Gordon, to your point, Gordon, 2 of 7, 6 points, 4 rebounds. So Portland defensively has matched up very well in this game. I think if you're Denver, they've got to find a way to get Michael Porter Jr. going because he only played 23 minutes tonight. He really, really struggled. And you could tell his body language was pretty bad. He was getting locked up. So if you're Denver, you got to find a way to get the others more involved, which just naturally is easier at home in the playoffs with the crowd behind you.
Yes.
getting your role players involved. So I would imagine, I would imagine like if there's a game where you have Rivers or Jermichael Green or Composite or Gordon going off, it's going to be easier for Jokic. They're going to take more attention off of Jokic. So I don't know if there's a ton of adjustments outside of little things to find ways to get them more open. Um, Other than that, I mean, the series still, the teams are still pretty even. They still feel pretty
Yeah.
much, I mean, talent, like just overall, they feel pretty even still.
And I think you feel good about that if you're a Portland fan, because to your
Oh, yeah.
point, we have not gotten in a clutch situation yet, but Portland's guys in the clutch you tend to trust more, I think, than Denver's guys. Um, to that point a little bit, Damian Lillard did not shoot well today at all. He had
One
honestly
to 10.
a really poor game for his standards offensively. He was obviously got to the free throw line, which was really good to see. He distributed really well, and he knew he didn't have to be a superstar scorer today because Portland was just clicking so well offensively. Powell was hitting his shots so well. Nurkic was phenomenal. CJ was a little shaky at first, but then he really settled in. So both Dame and we've gotten huge performances from Lillard in the first 3 games. So you expect that to come back when the pressure's on. And we still haven't had a crazy CJ game yet, which is a good sign because Portland needs just 2 more wins. If they can get a CJ crazy game in one of those, and that'll make it that much easier. And in the clutch, you've got Dame, CJ, and Carmelo who can just go get a bucket. And Norman Powell, too, has proven that he can go get a bucket.
100%. They have a lot of dudes. They have a lot of dudes with experience. Their problem really has never been the talent level. It's always been the continuity. And today, the continuity was great. They looked awesome out there. They were all playing really well. They were communicating, moving their feet, and switching really well in defense. Portland, when they're playing bad defense, they don't switch. Their switcher late or they miss it completely. When they usually, it's not the initial defender's fault when they give up points. It's usually because there's bad help defense. But today they looked awesome. So hopefully they figure something out. Because as long as they play defense like this, I mean, it's hard to imagine Denver takes this series. I mean, unless Will Barton would provide a huge element and does in time. I mean, if Portland's able to keep playing defense like this, it's hard to imagine that Jokic is going to be enough to beat them.
Yeah, and I think part of what Portland has always switched everything for better or worse. And today we saw the adjustment where Cantor did not play until garbage time. I think the adjustment where when Jokic is out and Denver's just running screen and roll every time, because that's like all they can really do with that unit. Portland just had the athletic wings in there in Covington and Hollis Jefferson, and then Powell or Anthony, which Anthony's not a great defender, but he's still young and athletic. Portland could switch everything and keep up, which Cantor, for all his strengths, just can't do. He cannot keep up in the screen and roll game at all. And that's where he was getting exposed earlier in the series when he was getting meaningful minutes. Either Jokic would be in there and he just cook him one-on-one, or Cantor just couldn't keep up on the screen and roll with Denver's quick guards. So that adjustment, bringing in Hollis Jefferson, I think is pretty big time. I'd love to see Derek Jones still get some run in there, especially Hollis Jefferson. I'm loving what he's bringing games 3 and 4 today. I think he got pushed around a little bit by Millsap. I wonder if we'll see maybe a little adjustment where they switch him onto Green and then they move Covington onto Millsap, because Millsap did have his way a little bit. And that's just a small adjustment I think you can make, and you can still switch stuff because Millsap isn't quite he's really smart, so he can get to his spot, but he's not quite athletic enough to where you could switch back, I think, quick enough onto him. But I think that adjustment of not playing Cantor, which is too bad. I really like Cantor as a player, but just in this series, he's not playable. It's a horrible matchup for him. And I think that has really helped Portland's defense and the rotations.
Yeah, I mean, Cantor can't guard wings. I mean, that's not an ask that's possible for him. I agree. I've liked what I've seen out of Hollis Jefferson. I mean, it's not even the stats where he had 2 points, 2 boards, but he holds it down defensively. And then you're right. They want to switch, and especially in that second unit, it's just easiest if they switch everything. I mean, Hollis Jefferson allows them to do that, especially having the 3 wings out there be Melo, Hollis Jefferson, and Covington. all three of them can switch onto any of the bigs that Denver's throwing out there, whether it be Millsap, Green. Even if they were to play McGee, they could throw out them on McGee and it not be the worst matchup in the world. Because they're all pretty beefy dudes.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you gotta like Portland's what they've found defensively too. I wonder if they've kind of found something matchup wise with Denver, because they've been able to seem to keep them away from the rim better. And that's what really struggled, especially in game two.
Yeah.
Game two was pretty hard to watch. Like Denver was just getting wide open layups after wide open layups. But
crazy.
all of a sudden now Denver can't get to the rim. And that's really what you're looking for. I was watching the Bucks Heat game before this game. And literally every time Miami tried to drive and there was Brook Lopez or there was Giannis in the paint, they would just dribble, turn around, and dribble themselves out back to the 3-point line. It's like, man, that'd be so nice to have just that ability to keep people away from the rim. It's something Portland hasn't had. So it'd be interesting to see if they've found that or if that's just a one game thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that will come down to Denver's adjustments. And to be honest, Denver's not going to be this bad again shooting.
No.
They were tossing up. Portland's defense was really good and the contests were a lot better, but Denver was also missing their open shots, which you just usually don't see. And Jokic was missing shots he usually makes, even if they were contested really well by Nurkic. So you don't expect to see that. But Damian Lillard's not going to go 1 of 10 again, especially if it's close and they really need him to step up, which they just didn't need him to do today because everyone was stepping up so well and he was distributing and guys were hitting their shots.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that. Jokic 7 of 18, 16 points. Wow. I agree. I think Denver is going to come out with more of a fire next game, and I think Portland's going to have to adjust to that too. I think they're going to have to find a way to match their defensive intensity in this game without getting in foul trouble, because that is the one thing that could hurt their defense is if the refs just start calling fouls, they're gonna have to adjust again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And obviously we've griped about the officiating a little bit throughout this series. Jokic is one of those guys that just gets calls. I think Portland actually adjusted to that really well today. I don't know enough about to know exactly how they went about doing that, but Jokic didn't get to the free throw line very much. It almost seemed like Portland just clogged the paint so well and lived with 3-pointers, and Denver didn't make their 3-pointers, whereas they did in game 3. I kind of think that's the strategy. Because if Austin Rivers is scoring 20 points in the fourth quarter or Campazzo's knocking down his threes. And we saw today, Campazzo had a couple really nice moves actually to create an open shot and he just bricked it, which is going to happen more times than not. So I really think that I think Portland's figured out the strategy of it's better than their normal hope they miss because it's not Jokic necessarily.
Well, exactly. And you look at just like in game 1, in game 4, Jokic 1 assist. So you got to make those other dudes beat you and not beat you by catching the ball from Jokic and laying it in, but beat you one-on-one. You want Austin Rivers to take Norman Powell one-on-one or Campazzo to try and drive on Dame. I mean, there was Dame had 2 or 3 steals on Campazzo just driving to the rim. So Portland in their 2 wins, they've done a great job of not letting Jokic get out there and dominate with his facilitating, which is what we talked about in our episode previewing this in the Y Ball Starters podcast.
Yes.
But they in games that we've won, we've been able to keep Jokic from distributing because that's when he's really dangerous. Because if Jokic is getting 15, 16 assists, I mean, that's 40 points right there he's accounting for. And then if he's scoring 30 also, I mean, he's accounting for 80 points by himself. And that's not a recipe for success, allowing one person to do that, even if he is the MVP. So they've got to find a way to make the other dudes beat them with their own game.
You know what And another thing is they became a little more creative in defending Jokic, where they threw some fake
Mhm.
doubles at him, and they were even willing to gamble a little bit. There was one play I really, really liked in the first half, and it actually was a gamble that didn't pay off. It resulted in a wide open three that Denver ended up making.
Mhm.
But Jokic caught it up at the top of the key about 17, 18 feet out, and Nurkic was pressuring him, and Jokic turned to his right, and Dame was on the far side, and Dame just left his man and tried to steal it. Um, it didn't, he just barely missed it, and his man was left wide open for three. But honestly, throwing those looks sometimes just to, it seemed like Jokic was working so much harder today. Um, which offensively that helped too because Nurkic was hitting his shots. And there were a couple of times where it was just like, yeah, Nurk, eat, go down to him and just let him like, and Jokic isn't going to foul because Jokic doesn't want to get in foul trouble. And Jokic doesn't always play that physical anyway. They just made Jokic work really hard for his shots, and it showed with the way Jokic was shooting his jump shot, which is another big key.
Yeah, it's one of the things that Brendan Haywood on TNT was talking about. Is Portland was involving Jokic in the action on when Portland was on offense every possession, just to use more energy, just to slow him down on the other end as a form of defense. But yeah, I agree to your original point of like clogging the lane. Like it just felt like Denver up games 1 through 3, maybe not as much in game 1, but at least especially 2 and 3, they were able to get to the rim whenever they wanted. But today, Portland did a great job of walling off the interior 7-8 feet closest to the basket. And they threw a lot of things at Jokic. They actually started throwing some double teams, some stunts. They were much more active. Dame was especially very active today defensively, which is really good. Him and CJ can be active defensively. They sometimes, especially when they're out of rhythm, aren't. But Dame, especially when in games where he's specifically not shooting well, he has been able to find ways to really produce in other ways. I mean, he had 8 boards and 10 assists today. I mean, you remember that random game against the Clippers when he had 18 rebounds on a game he didn't
Yeah.
score at all, like any points in regulation. So like Dame's been able to do that. So it's encouraging to see him be able to continue to do that in the playoffs. And I mean, hey, we won a playoff game where Dame was 1 of 10. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen very often.
No, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that's not realistic at all. So that's cool to see. And um, a credit to the fact that we have built a roster that has talent. It's just about
Yeah.
putting that together with coaching and effort and stuff like that. Well, thanks to everyone who tuned in for our live. We'll have this after every playoff game. Again, game 5, huge game in Denver. Obviously, it's a well-documented fact that the winner of game 5 in a series that's tied 2-2 wins the series about 80% of the time or more. Obviously, 2 years ago with Portland, Denver, there was an exception.
True.
Denver won game 5 and then Portland won 2 in a row, but that still doesn't happen very often. And I mean, it's hard to imagine Portland losing a game in front of their home fans where they can just ice it. So a winning game 5 would be pretty huge for Portland. They're going to have to win one on the road. Why not game 5?
Sure.
Well, you can find us here on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed so far throughout the playoffs. At Wibble Starters. You can also find us at the same handle on Spotify for our regular podcast episodes. We've got about 17 episodes out. We've got a fun episode coming this week with a local coach that a lot of people will recognize, some fun players coming up soon that a lot of people will recognize. And you can keep up with us on social media on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, also at Wibble Starters. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in today. We'll talk to you on Tuesday for following Portland and Denver, 6 o'clock tip on NBA TV and NBC Sports Northwest locally. Thanks again for tuning in.